right. Hey, welcome, folks. This is going to be your sit rep. It's 10/9/2025. Coming to you live here from the Monkey Lounge in the great state of Texas. And so today we're going to be talking about the Insurrection Act. What is it? When does it apply? When can the president pull the trigger on it? What's going on around the U.S. that would warrant that? All right. And then we're going to look back at a little bit of history just to show you where it has actually been done before and where it hasn't been done. So a little bit of misconception there around the J6 stuff. But let me tell you, it is absolutely on the horizon, and I can see why it's going to have to be done. So we'll get into the news cycle around that. We're also going to be taking a look at the skies as it relates to your freedoms, all right, because they all go hand in hand, okay? Now, before we do so, hey, let me just take you over here to our sponsor for this show. This is going to be the satellite phone store as always. You can jump into sat123.com. That's sat123.com. And check out the latest deals. They've got all kinds of things from satellite phones like this one right here. This is my Quiver that I use on a regular basis. It's a fantastic phone. In fact, it's this one right here, the 9555. But they've got, the MRSat with Faraday packs. They've got, in fact, this one right here is absolutely, if you're sick of your internet provider and you want something that's going to not fail you, this right here is Starlink. You can take it with you, too. That's what's really cool. But plugs and plays, very easy to use, not a big footprint. You don't have to have a big antenna over your house. You just throw it in the window, and you're off to the races. But, again, sat123.com, or just put your phone right over this QR code. It'll take you right there. Or you can give them a call, 941-841-0844. Tell them Monkey sent you. All right. So let's talk about what's up in the skies right now. It is just getting started today. We're sitting around 145 in the sky from a military perspective only. But keep in mind, I've stripped out at least that, maybe a little bit more from the trainer perspective. So if you look over here on the scoreboard, you can see all the trainers, a high number. This is sorted by volume. And you can see quite a few trainers up. That's because they got new money. It's the new year for them. And so you can also see our high flyers. All right, 90,000 feet. That is so high above commercial air traffic, it's not even funny. Same thing with this one, 80,000 feet. So those are milli intel, military intel balloons. And you can see they're all over the place. Now, let me just show you what the sky looked like yesterday afternoon, as we kind of get into the deets on this. But you can see the West Coast was covered up. Now, those balloons haven't disappeared. They're still all up there. The one over the Pacific Northwest is still there. And we're going to get into Portland, and we're going to get into Chicago, etc. But just look at the amount of coverage across the United States at any given point. Folks, the government is watching. You talk about mass surveillance. Anything that happens across this country, they got eyes on it. They're watching nonstop. All right. So now take a look at the intel flights, right? As you see the complete coverage here, you get over to the intel side, and these are guys that are just kind of going across broad brush, running routes, right? And you can see the United States is almost completely covered up in terms of intelligence flights. So what kind of stuff are they gathering? That right there, man in the middle circles, right? Those are doing that's signal intelligence stuff, cell tower in the sky, so to speak. Some low altitude stuff over Chicago, right? I mean, just take a look at that. Then you can see over D.C., down towards Virginia, the Carolinas, that little loop right over the mountains. All right, that's where we see the R-135 activity looking as well. So it looks like they've got somebody down there doing some low altitude searching. All right. But I mean, almost the entire United States is covered up there. Now we get into drones, and just notice you've got some semi-low altitude stuff there over Biggs Army Airfield. You've got things out over the danger box area where they watch over the water. A lot of northern border activity as of late. That's south of Winnipeg, right? It's going to be a Q9, right? That's border protection. A little broken trace headed out to the center of the U.S. It just goes dark. And then a little bit out over the water, right? coming out of DC area. Little tiny blip. That's probably going to be a Q1 drone, Predator drone. And then you can see from the intel perspective as we continue on, this is a R-135 looking very closely across the border down into Mexico. All right. Transition out of Florida back to home base ops. And then you can see over the Dakotas, very specific route. All right. And then that imaginary box we always look at digging into the mountains there. You know, it's not probably a coincidence that we bring over a bunch of folks from Afghanistan. They probably live in those mountain ranges, or they've migrated to those mountain ranges because that's where they're comfortable living. So pay attention to that. That's important, okay? Now you get into the spec ops community. Where are they headed, right? This is important because it kind of gives you a lay of the land of what's really kind of burning when it comes to the U.S. Notice they're headed in and out of the Houston kind of area, up here to Fort Carson, which you expect to see spec ops doing. This is going to be the Uber for spec ops, by the way, folks, not going to be your Black Hawk, etc. And you do notice they head down, way down to Lima, Peru. We tend to frequent that quite a bit. In and out of DC, around the Chesapeake, and then up there to the Northeast. So again, spec ops community, pretty active. All right. Now, let's get into, let me shift this over to the DOJ. Let's see what they've been up to. It's a pretty broad brush for the last 5 days. You can see them West Coast, in and out of Vegas, a little north of Vegas. All right, some round robins. You can see that one inbound to Vegas. All right, again, DOJ, FBI. Pretty frequent in and around Missouri, St. Louis, and the like. Some broken traces leaving there. Coming out of DC, Norfolk area down to, looks to be around Trumpsville, Mar-a-Lago, Miami, South Florida. Then up there to the Northeast where we saw the spec ops guys going. Okay. And then into Chicago. Right? Pay attention to that one. That's important. And then take a look at this. This is going to be your agency boys. Let's just call it let's just leave it at that. All right. I typically don't show this stuff, but I'm going to throw it out there because I want you to see where they're headed. Notice they're headed into Southern California, pretty hot and heavy. Okay. Rolling out of that location, going across the drink. What are they up to? Over into Europe, etc. All right. So remember, agency boys, like they went into Iceland, over towards Oslo, right, down towards Malta. Okay. Just a data point for you, pointing it out there. And then this is your other Uber for your agency boys, right? Your gray birds. Don't worry about the West Coast stuff. That's what they use for taking engineers out to China Lake, etc. But you see this, right? Just watch where they tend to go, right? Up here to the northern border, right? Right, same spot where you're seeing the Q1 Predator drone activity. Okay. This is important because these guys are usually ahead of what's coming, not after. So when you see those locations, again, same spot you see Northeast where you get spec ops going, etc. Right? So again, it's a data point for you, but those folks are usually the ones that are ahead of the chaos, right? Not forward observer types, but forward stirrer types. Okay. So just pay attention to that. All right. Comes important. Could be. All right. Now let's kind of start peeling back what's going on across the U.S. when it comes to the insurrection piece. Okay. So Trump today, he's got somebody coming in. Yesterday, it was the Canadians, I believe it was. Let me just kind of go in. Sorry. This is a roundtable on Antifa. That's never good. Tuesday was Canada. Today's Finland. So somebody's coming in to kiss the ring. All right. So let's just put that one out there again. Pay attention to it, because I also saw that Ukraine was headed in as well. So I do feel like there may be something very big on the horizon when it comes to the NATO aspect. All right. All right. Now, what is the Insurrection Act? Let's get into that first before we start really getting into the details of what's happening out there across the United States. So the full name is the Insurrection Act of 1807. Okay. And you can see the USC, all the codes and everything tied to it. All right. But the purpose, right? It allows the President of the United States to deploy U.S. military forces domestically to restore order when rebellion, unlawful obstruction, or insurrection prevents the execution of federal or state laws. All right? That's key, because we're watching that unfold right before our very eyes. Okay? The core idea here is it's an exception to the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, which generally forbids the use of U.S. military for domestic law enforcement. So this what that does is basically suspends that, right? And it puts the Insurrection Act into play. So let's get into some of the deets around it. When can it be revoked? Sorry, invoked, not revoked. Stand by. So there's certain stipulations that allow the president to put this into play. So he can invoke the Insurrection Act in three main situations: at a state's request. So if a state's legislature or a governor, right, if the legislature can't be convened and asks for help to suppress an insurrection or domestic violence that overwhelms state authorities. So in these two cases, like Chicago and Portland, they're not really asking for it. Okay, we're just doing it. So an example would be when local police or National Guard can't contain riots or uprisings. So continue on. Without the state request, now that's kind of where it falls in. When a rebellion or unlawful obstruction makes it impractical to enforce federal law within a state through normal judicial means. And then number 3, to protect civil rights, right? When violence or obstruction deprives citizens of constitutional rights and the state cannot or will not protect them. This clause was used heavily during civil rights movements, okay? So before using the act, the president must issue a proclamation ordering insurgents to disperse within a limited time, and only if they refuse can the military intervene. So that part is key, so remember that, okay? So when you hear him talking about, I'm getting ready to pull the trigger on the Insurrection Act, then he's probably firing a shot over the bow for them to basically take heed, okay? So some of the historical examples of actual use, right? Now, this is pretty interesting. Now, in the early 19th century, right? So you're talking about 1808, so shortly after it was created, to 1812, it was used to suppress insurrection among militias and local uprising. And in 1831, Nate Turner's rebellion, right? He used to help suppress a major slave rebellion in Virginia. And then number 2, the Civil War era, right? 1861, Abraham Lincoln used the call-up of state militias to suppress the Confederate rebellion, right? Beginning of the Civil War. So that was before it kicked off. So let's continue. Number 3, reconstruction of civil rights and civil rights. 1871. So Ulysses S. Grant invoked to combat the KKK in South Carolina. Federal troops were deployed to restore order and enforce civil rights laws, right? In 1957. So I went from 1871 to 1957. Eisenhower, right? He sent the 101st Airborne Division to Little Rock, Arkansas, to enforce school desegregation. Right? You may remember seeing that on the news. And then 1962, Kennedy used it to enforce desegregation at a University of Mississippi. Remember seeing that on the news. 1963, JFK again sent troops to Alabama to enforce desegregation in Tuscaloosa. Remember seeing that on the news. Right? And then 1967, that was a beautiful year. Right? That was Lyndon B. Johnson invoked that during the Detroit riots to restore order. 1968. So they were using it the daylights out of it. And from the late 50s to the late 60s, there's like a 10-year span where that was their go-to. And then Johnson again, right, used it after the assassination of Martin Luther King to quell riots in D.C., Chicago, and Baltimore. So we get to the modern era, right? When has this been used as of late? Right, 1989. G.W. Bush used it during Los Angeles riots in 1992 after the Rodney King verdict. Federal troops and Marines were deployed at the request of the California governor. 2005, G.W. Bush. So that was the daddy at the top and then Junior down at below. He considered it but didn't use it after Hurricane Katrina, and there was a debate about invoking it to control the lawlessness in New Orleans, but he ultimately relied on the National Guard under state authority instead. So he was about to pull the trigger on it there. Wouldn't have been a good look. And then 2020, right? Trump actually considered but didn't use it, publicly threatened to invoke it during nationwide unrest following the George Floyd protests, but never formally issued the proclamation or the orders. So there was a big misconception when it came to the J6 stuff that it was put into play, but it actually was not. Okay. So the key takeaway here is Insurrection Act gives a president rare, extraordinary power, essentially temporary martial law authority to use military force in the U.S. It's been used fewer than 30 times in over 200 years, and almost always in extreme situations, civil rights enforcement or major riots. Presidents are hesitant to use it because it's politically explosive. If you saw the size of the font I'm reading, folks, it's a Festivus miracle that I can actually see what I'm reading. And can easily be seen as overreach, right? That's kind of where we are today. We're going to get into that and we get into some of the news, all right? And so when invoked, it temporarily suspends state control and puts federal troops in a law enforcement role. We're already seeing that in D.C. Remember, he federalized the police there. So, okay, let's get back over here to this and start getting into the news. Now, remember, for the D.C. side, in order for him to use the UCMJ, which is military tribunal, he has to declare martial law, right? This does the Insurrection Act, I don't believe, gives the military the right to try civilians. All right. So here's the news that popped out a couple of days ago, and he says he may invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy more troops in the U.S., and he's getting a lot of pushback from mayors and governors in blue states, right? Long overdue. But he says, we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. And if I had to enact it, I would do that. He said, if people were being killed and courts were holding us up as governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. So he's already talked about doing it. He's brought it up several times, in fact. And you may remember I said it's a slippery slope because then all of a sudden you can start to kind of get into this overreach of power. All right. So the other day, Bondi, which I'm not a big fan. I don't trust her as far as I can throw her. And I know many of you feel the same way. Right. She gets called out to a Senate hearing. And Democrats on the Senate panel basically grilled her because they're saying that, hey, look, the DOJ is really, really becoming kind of a political arm of the current administration. So they're weaponizing justice, right? And we've seen that before. We've actually had our own issues with that on the other side of the coin, okay? So she gets drilled over, over all of this, grilled over all of this. And they brought up a lot of things, right? They brought up Epstein, which I got news for you. It's not going away. If they think we've forgotten about it, they're sorely mistaken, okay? So they're also brought up this allegation about the border czar, Homan, basically taking $50,000 in cash from an undercover agent last year. That's the MO of the Democrats, folks, if you haven't figured that out, right? They like to blackmail and bait and set people up so that they can use them as, pawns in the future, right? So he didn't take it. It was just, them trying to throw something out there that it was even offered. It's all about, you put it out there publicly and everybody comes up with the court of public opinion, but he didn't take it. If there's anybody that's the massive threat and the biggest threat to what's going on out there right now, it's this guy. I mean, Homan that dude's cracking heads. He is putting ice into situations that are absolutely inflaming the left. He shut down our border. I mean, that guy is the one dude out of all of them, besides probably Kristi Noem, that's getting it done. Okay. So nonetheless, Bondi gets in front of the Senate and just gets filleted, but she gives as well as she takes there, right? So, but at the end of the day, the left is absolutely freaking out because they feel like they were weaponizing the DOJ, which they need to, honestly, right? It's been used on us for quite a time. It's time to give as well as we got, okay? All right, we talk about Chicago. You talk about the TFRs that are over the region. And you'll note, this right here is tied to pretty much drone activity over the city. So we've got some low altitude drones watching, making note of everything that's going on out there. Runs until October the 12th. So we got 3 more days of that. Could it be extended? Absolutely could be. And then this is tied to a baseball field. Okay. Now, you've got lots of other exercises, et cetera, happening across the United States. We'll take this one away. And you get out here to this side. Okay, you start getting into and around Portland. These are UAV, so drone areas. Okay, unmanned aircraft scheduled. This going to be, again, this is tied to ICE, a TFR. And this is something else tied to drone activity around the area. But this looks to be the hot spot around the South Waterfront, South Portland. Okay, let's talk about what's going on in the news. So Trump's threat to invoke the Insurrection Act escalates a showdown with the Democratic cities. And so all of these leaders are basically digging their heels in. They're taking things to court. And here in Chicago, you talk about Texas actually stepping up to the plate and loaning some National Guard troops to go in and help get things settled in. But we're in for a fight, okay? That's why he has to pull the trigger on the Insurrection Act, because these guys are getting in the way of us putting, true freedom and justice into play. Homeland Security agents rammed by vehicles outside Chicago, right? And this is pretty crazy. I don't know if you saw the video of what happened, but this lady basically rams Homeland Security vehicles, which is a good way to get killed, folks. Don't do that. And they end up engaging with her. She takes a couple rounds, goes to the hospital, and then now she's in jail. But she had a fully automatic weapon on her. And, they're getting bold. And they're doing this against ICE agents. This is why they have to have masks to protect their identity, because they get doxxed. And, if you've ever just done something as simple as hold up your phone in front of somebody and watch a yellow box go around their face. Yeah, that's very dangerous because if these guys have online profiles and their faces are identified, they can figure out who they are. They can start stalking them. They can mess with them. So very dangerous. All right. Now, nonetheless, this is the kind of stuff that they're up against. And this is why he has to employ the Insurrection Act. Now, again, these are mayors and governors, right? Trump calls for imprisonment of Pritzker and this guy, Mayor Brandon Johnson. Yeah, look, if they're obstructing justice, then absolutely, I think it's on the table. So let's see what happens. But this is old Chi-Town up there, and looks like he is not messing around. So let's see what happens if that would. I mean, you talk about something big. To have these guys get arrested would just be wow. That'd be pretty spectacular because it would absolutely shut down their effort. But then look at this. They double down, right? The Chicago mayor is unhinged and Trump is a threat to democracy. Remember the old Mockingbird media? Threat. This was a threat to democracy. Talking points. All right. In fact, if you look at the crime in all of these major cities that are, democratically run, that's actually the threat to democracy. They want them running amok because, look, if people are so focused on this, they're not watching what's going on around them, and they're too busy head down in the fight, okay? National Guard deployed, and this is a Texas Guard deployed to Chicago. Now, I will tell you, I saw a photo of some of the guys coming in from Texas, man. They are definitely well-fed. I don't know why that photo got out there, but man, mercy, these boys were definitely some beef eaters. But nonetheless, man, they're throwing it down. They're putting Texas troops in there to help stabilize things. I love it when Texas steps up to the plate. But I will tell you, I'm watching some of the other news, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. I'm reading the writing on the wall for Texas. Something big is definitely brewing here as well. It's not just Chicago. It's not just Portland, as we're going to get into here. But things are definitely afoot, folks. All right, D.C., Portland, Chicago, right? Watch areas like Baltimore. Watch L.A. again, okay? Definitely starting to expand as things start to ratchet up. Now, this is coming out of Portland. I sleep with a gas mask on because life next to Portland protests are angering Trump. But this person probably has, if I was a bet man, purple hair. But nonetheless, not that there's anything wrong with that. But it's being in a war zone is what they're comparing it to. Miss Hammer, 57, says about her street, several other residents spoke to BBC News about the unrest. BBC is absolutely left-leaning, folks. And so, nonetheless, I mean, look, there are people out there wearing chicken suits and gas masks. I mean, just absolute lunacy. And you can see this person is getting taken down. But a little OC spray straightens them right out just about every time. I don't know if you've ever been downwind of that stuff, but whew, it is the most lethal form you can use besides a bullet. I mean, absolutely crippling. If you get that directly on you, like these guys that are getting direct spray right in the face, you wish you were shot instead. It is that bad. It's so bad. But nonetheless, these are the folks in Portland. Right? So Chicago, Portland, right? Now they're going to go take it to the courts. And that's coming today. Now, this is why he's going to, again, have to invoke the Insurrection Act, because more than likely the courts that they're taking him to will be a Democratic judge, and they're going to shut down what's going on with the guard. And then you're going to see Trump have to pull the trigger on that if he wants to continue this course of action. All right. 78% of Americans favor deportation of criminal illegal immigrants. That's a new poll. that's let me tell you, I think the United States is starting to kind of step up in terms of everybody getting on the same page as to what exactly we're up against and why this is important. So the fact that we've got that amount of people that are behind it tells you this thing is not going away anytime soon. It's a good thing, right? All right. Now I mentioned Texas, and I'm bringing this up because you'll notice that Texas AG Paxton actually pledges to crack down on leftist terror cells here in Texas. Now, when you talk about terror cells, it's kind of a loose term here because remember, there are a lot, like Antifa is now part of that, right? And I know they are in abundance in Dallas, okay? So, writing on the wall here, you're about to see the same stuff that's happening in Chicago, in Portland, is about to start happening here in Dallas. All right. I'll bet my life on it. The only difference is Trump doesn't have to send troops here because we've got, the right governor. Well, some would say maybe not the right governor, but we've got the right political environment here right now to actually start going after these guys and starting to clean up the city. Remember, Dallas is also one of those, what city am I thinking? Sanctuary cities, right? And so, sorry, I had just complete vapor lock there for a second. But yeah, Dallas it's a sanctuary city, right? They're protected by the mayor, which is a flaming liberal, protected by, police department, et cetera, which are run by flaming liberals. So something to think about. Now, just out of curiosity, and I started to lean in with this, have you noticed your skies since the government has been shut down? Pretty blue. Not seeing a lot of clouds, not seeing, a lot of chemtrails. I'm telling you, absolutely, the minute this thing happened and the government got shut down, and all of a sudden, all of our skies, storm clouds are starting to look, right, along the same lines as they should. And all the chemtrails are starting to disappear. I've got blue skies, and I've had them here over Texas since the shutdown. So it definitely tells you something's up. I just out of curiosity, what do you guys think about the government shutdown? I'm just love to see it in the chat. I think leave it shut down, in my personal opinion. I think the government needs some humbling. I think you start sending people home. And I think the senators and the congressmen, if they can't get it done, I think you freeze their pay, and you basically, make them feel the pain like the rest of us, right? So, all right, well, listen, that's going to do it for today. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your Thursday and a great weekend. We'll see you on the other side. You guys be safe out there. Keep that powder dry. Stay frosty. God bless. Monkey out.